I was in Shenzhen Baoan Airport, panicking about my flight to Beijing being delayed. You see, it was the early hours of Monday morning, and I needed to make it to Beijing on schedule in order to catch my connecting flight to London. I had to make it to work on time. And yet, here I was. My carefully calculated plan to make it to our Canary Wharf offices before 9 a.m. was falling apart due to an uncooperative typhoon. You see, the flight time from Shenzhen to Beijing is about 3 hours. Add an hour for the layover process, 10 hours for the flight from Beijing to London Heathrow, and an hour from Heathrow to the office. You can make the whole journey in just about 15. But factor in the 7-hour time difference and you open up a world of opportunity. As long as you leave Shenzhen before 1 a.m. local time, you can make it to work by 9 a.m. Frantically searching for options, I noticed there was still one more flight that night, leaving from nearby Hong Kong and flying directly to London. So I ran across Shenzhen Airport to the gate for the ferry to Hong Kong International Airport, only to be told that the last ferry for that night had already left. In that moment, I received a text notification telling me that the weather had cleared and my Shenzhen to Beijing flight was about to take off. I ran back across the airport, just barely making it onto my original flight. After landing in Beijing an hour behind schedule, I sprinted across the Beijing airport, only to be told the flight to London was about to take off and I would have to wait until the next flight at 6 a.m. I found a nice long airport bench, put my bags down, set an alarm on my phone, and fell asleep. Now, I know I just spent a solid 2 minutes telling an overly detailed, mildly mundane, and seemingly random story of my attempts to execute a single commercial navigation itinerary. Why? I wanted to convey a picture of me doing my best to balance my two very different professional lives. One of these lives, an overworked London-based investment banker, and the other, a China-based musician and variety TV personality. People would compare my life to that of Hannah Montana, the fictional Disney pop star who, upon taking off her blonde wig, could become instantly unrecognizable and live life as a normal teenage girl. But there's a more important distinction between us, apart from the fact that she looks like that, and I look like, well, this. Hannah Montana was able to live both of her lives in one city, Los Angeles, whereas I was stuck flying between London and China 1, 2, sometimes even 3 times a month, while trying to keep both investment banking managing directors and Chinese TV station executives happy. The modern world is filled with an ever-increasing amount of pressure to follow a given conventional path. Go to school, study hard, go to a good university, and get a good job. This pressure can come from our parents, our teachers, our peers, society as a whole. And you know what? By and large, I agree. Education and working hard are incredibly important to a person's development, regardless of where life takes them. But what I want to pick apart today is the notion of a good job. Coming out of Oxford with a degree in PPE, philosophy, politics, and economics, there was a very finite set of potential career paths that society expected me to follow. Finance, law, management consulting, maybe even politics. But anything else was looked down upon, seen as too risky, or a waste of your education. And as a 19 to 20-year-old kid coming out of undergrad, I wasn't brave enough to disagree. And yet, after leaving university, moving to London, and beginning work in investment banking, I couldn't help but feel this wasn't the only thing that I wanted to do with my life. And the statistics showed that I wasn't alone. A 2017 paper published in the Economic Journal by quantitative social scientists Alex Bryson and George McCarran measured people's happiness at random points in time. They found that, on average, individuals were more unhappy while engaging in paid work than while doing any of the other 39 activities they could have reported being engaged in, with the sole exception of being sick in bed. Moreover, in a 2017 Gallup poll carried out across over 150 countries, 85% of people reported feeling not engaged or actively disengaged at work. It's astonishing. We spend between half and 9/10 of our waking hours for decades of our life at work, and yet we choose to take jobs that make us unhappy and disengaged. With work taking up so much of our lives, surely we should spare no effort in making sure work is something that we're excited to do every day, something that gives our lives meaning. And in that realization, I learned this first key lesson, reframed with the terms of the theme of today's event, truth and dare. Seek out the truth about where you find meaning, and dare to pursue that truth. Every child has big dreams about the amazing things they want to accomplish in the future. And yet, by age 21, I noticed the people around me abandoning those dreams in favor of the path of least resistance. Why does this happen? I have 2 theories. First, us humans are inherently risk-averse. If you follow the same path as everyone else, you can easily see where that path will lead you years in the future. The chances of you unexpectedly encountering significant obstacles or metaphorical dangers are comparatively small. Second, we put too great a discount factor on future fulfillment. We see this phenomenon in more trivial matters. I stay up late to watch a movie and wake up tired instead of going to bed early and waking up rested. But we also see it in matters that drive our life paths. I spend all of my time outside of work socializing instead of working on a project that could bring me great fulfillment years in the future. And yet, by adhering to this natural temporal discounting, we prevent ourselves from accomplishing so many great things. So here is my advice. Don't sit in the passenger seat of your own life. Don't let yourself have regrets on your 30th, on your 40th, 50th, 80th birthdays. Regrets about what you could have accomplished if you had believed in yourself more, if you had worked harder and taken more risks. And don't get me wrong, I actually really like finance. I love the numbers and the deep dives into companies' business models and financial statements. Investment banking is a great career. But there was more that I wanted to do as well. And that desire for something more is what eventually brought me to balance my career in finance with my music and TV life in China. And in that, I learned my second key lesson. It's okay to pursue more than one thing. And it's okay to change paths. People are multidimensional, and we evolve over time. And as traditional economic rigidities break down, technology has enabled us to supercharge our efficiency and to be in many places at once. The one-dimensional, linear career path has gone from a global norm to an outdated custom, still propagated only by the most conservative and inertial institutions of our economy. Companies and organizations increasingly value breadth of knowledge and diversity of experience over siloed proficiency in narrow functions. I personally found that as long as I worked on every project to the best of my ability and made sure I was always learning and always moving forwards, that pursuing multiple paths at once actually gave me otherwise unattainable experiences and knowledge. In fact, time constraints aside, my two seemingly unrelated careers produced more synergies than I ever would have expected. Insights I developed working in music and Chinese entertainment improved my ability to work in European banking, and vice versa. But it did take time for these synergies to realize. And there were times where I doubted it was possible to follow both paths at once. I had spent almost 2 years in China when I decided I wanted to go back into investment banking, but still maintain my connections to and my career in China. Everyone told me it was impossible. A senior manager of a media company I worked with told me there was absolutely no way you can pull it off. And there was a point where I felt like everyone else was right. Our TV show Informal Talks, Jaye for our Chinese speakers in the audience, scheduled a 2-day filming of 4 episodes in Beijing, not 10 days after I was due to start work again in London. Tuesday and Wednesday of my second week at work. So, without any good options, I tried my best to take 3 days of annual leave. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Unsurprisingly, human resources did not agree. Eventually, they agreed to give me just that Wednesday off. So, on Tuesday, I went to work in London, and to the chagrin of the TV executives, completely missed the 2 episodes we filmed that day. That evening after work, I raced to the airport and got on an overnight flight to Beijing. I landed Wednesday early afternoon Chinese time and raced to the TV studio, arriving after my co-stars had already started filming the first episode for that day. If anyone goes back and watches Informal Talks Season 4, Episode 11, you can see me run onto the set, right in the middle of the episode. We filmed for another 6 or so hours that day, and then I raced back to the Beijing airport, caught a flight, threw on a suit in the airplane bathroom, landed in London Thursday morning, and made it on time to work. I made it happen. Kind of. But I really doubted myself in that moment. I had spent 26 hours in transit and only 6 hours where I was actually supposed to be. The TV directors weren't happy that I had missed precious filming time, and my bosses in London weren't happy that I had missed precious banking time. And though I made a lot of mistakes as time went on, I found better ways to balance my 2 jobs. I built rapport with my bosses in London. I worked as hard as I possibly could when in the offices to make up for my unconventional requests to take piecemeal annual leave. I was able to schedule a lot of my China arrangements on weekends. And when I made my debut studio album, we flew the whole production team into London and recorded it in the middle of the night after I got off work. And here, I learned the final key lesson. An unconventional life path is filled with the need to overcome doubt. The doubt can sometimes come from others, and it can sometimes come from yourself. Let's first talk about the type of doubt that can come from others, or external doubt. External doubt, I found, comes in two forms. When you decide to take this road less traveled, there will be people who tell you, A, you shouldn't take this road, and B, you can't take this road. When I first decided to go to China, I found myself surrounded by people of the first group. People who say it's too risky, it's not respectable, it's a waste of your education. When I decided to keep my work alive in China while also working in investment banking in London, I was surrounded by people who told me I would never find the time to do both. But I realized the importance of making these decisions for myself. After all, you know your own circumstances, capabilities, dreams, and values far better than anyone else. In her book, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, Australian palliative nurse turned author Bronnie Ware notes the single most voiced regret of her patients in the last 12 weeks of their lives was, quote, "I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life that others expected of me." Friends, family, teachers, and mentors can be an invaluable resource, but you can't forget that your life belongs only to you, not to anyone else. But perhaps for me, a challenge larger even than external doubt was my own internal doubt. And at no point was this internal doubt stronger than when I was working on my first studio album. About a month before we were due to start recording, I sent a bunch of songs I wrote to my producer, a super talented, super experienced guy who has worked with 易烊千玺, 中国新说唱, and a bunch of big Western artists as well. That night, we hopped on a video call. The first thing he said to me is, "I don't like any of them." "I sent you all of those songs and you don't like a single one?" He replied, "Nope, and I've got my LA to London plane ticket booked for a month from now, so you better write some good songs before then." So, for that month, I went to work, got home around midnight, wrote music until 4 a.m., and then got on the phone with the producer just to be told, "Meh, I'm not really feeling it," or, "I guess the verses are okay, but we'd have to change the chorus." I must have written 50 songs in those 30 days, only to have the vast majority of them completely turned down. And in that time period, I started to doubt two things about my life choices. One, I began to doubt if I even really had any noteworthy musical talent. Rejection after rejection of every single song I wrote. I questioned why this hotshot producer even wanted to work with me in the first place. And two, I began to doubt if any of this was even worth it. It was such a painful month. I was barely sleeping, at most 2 to 3 hours on a good night. I would fall asleep standing on the London Underground. I didn't speak to or see a single family member or friend the whole month. And yet when the whole production team arrived in London, and we started working on the album at Abbey Road Studios, I realized that all of my self-doubt was unfounded, and all of my sacrifices were more than worth it. I was surrounded by awesome, talented people in perhaps the most historied recording studio in the world, working on really cool music, a set of songs that my producer and I had finally agreed upon. It was an experience I never would have been able to have had I let doubt win, if I didn't believe in what I was doing and sacrifice my time, effort, and energy to make it happen. To tell the truth, I'm not sure how qualified I really am to come speak to you all today. I see myself as just another kid doing his best to be the best version of himself. But I have learned the importance of being active about your life, not being afraid to venture into uncharted waters and pursuing what you love. For my life the past few years, following these lessons has taken the shape of working in finance in the West and media in the East. But I'm nowhere near done with my journey, and that's okay. I'm interested in music and in finance and in a lot of other stuff too. Every day I look forward to waking up and pursuing new ideas and learning new things. And if I convince just one member of the audience today to think outside the box about where they want their life to go, to have the courage to bring change to the world in a novel way, then the time I've spent today will have been more than worth it. So, we've spoken about a lot, but I know what you all really care most about. Did I make it on time to work the day of the typhoon in Shenzhen? So, to return to the end of the chaotic journey I mentioned earlier, as I sat on that last 6 a.m. flight to London, I knew the delay was going to make me late for work. I knew I would have to race across London after landing, frantically doing my best to reply to an endless stream of emails on my hopelessly inadequate smartphone. I knew there would be a few people in the office who would glare with disdain at the lowly analyst who had the audacity to show up an hour and a half late to work on Monday morning. But as I looked out that ovular 747 window, with sleep-deprived bloodshot eyes, the sun rising over the North Sea, the English coastline in the distance, I couldn't help but feel there's no place I'd rather be. And on that note, I'd like to thank the whole team in Shanghai for putting this together and inviting me. Sorry I couldn't be there in person, and thank you all for listening. It's been a pleasure.